And thanks for coming at such short notice. So I'm Jackie, in case you haven't met me. So tonight is actually it's like a special session of a group that we have every month, which is called Karmic Management Discussion Group. That's its official title. So we meet once a month basically to discuss the ideas in this book, which was written by my teachers, Geshe Michael Roach and Lama Christie, and also by the gentleman we have here, Michael Gordon. So it's very, very amazing and exciting that we have one of the authors here when we're really trying to follow the book, the ideas in the book, and apply it to our lives. So there's an amazing story about how it happened to be that Michael's here. So I'm actually going to pass over to the person who made this evening happen. That's Roy Hay. So it's thanks to him that Michael's actually here this evening. So yeah, without any further ado, let's hand over to Roy.
Okay, good evening everybody. So let's welcome Michael Gordon.
So I didn't reply to Roy because I don't know how to use Facebook. So I never bothered. So if somebody wants to be my friend, just click OK. And then occasionally I ask somebody that I work with to post something. So anyway, so that's why I randomly thought I'll just try and reply to you. So I've got lots of friends who never hear from me. So we don't have a lot of time, so I thought maybe unless you want me to say something, I'll just answer questions. Or not.
I'll share this story about my use.
Oh, okay. So I grew up in London, and 14. I wasn't going to school anyway, so I stopped going at 14. So at 15, I became a hairdresser, and then I was 20 years old. I finished my apprenticeship, and I went to Johannesburg, South Africa for 3 weeks. And there I discovered or was introduced to a family of yogis. And it was very traditional, quite different to what you might find in a yoga studio today. It was a lot more philosophical, and the intention was clearly to teach you or encourage you to meditate. So it had a very powerful effect on me. I was 20 years old, I was English, so I was reasonably screwed up. Maybe more than reasonably. And I had a very powerful experience just when I met the teacher. So I started practicing this stuff, and then a year later I moved there for 5 years with the intention to study more. And by the way, I thought I'll start a business because I was too, not so, a little arrogant to go and work for somebody. I mean, you don't go from London and go and want to work for somebody in South Africa. So, being 21 years old, suddenly having a business, even if it was a very small one, I didn't have any, I never wanted a business, not at that point. And so whatever I was learning in the weekly satsang that we used to have, or the book I would read, essentially one book, I would apply to running a business. And then I continued to do that until I moved to America in 1977, and to New York. So actually that's what I continued to do, and I didn't realize there was anything particularly, I didn't realize anyone else was doing what I was doing until I read Diamond Cutter. I think that was like 2003. That's when it came out. And then I discovered that actually you could do it far better than I'd been doing it. But there was a whole method behind the concept of having a spiritual sense of how you were running a business. So I met Geshe Michael because he needed a place to hold a talk in New York, and he happened to have an auditorium in my business. And I said, well, we can host 150 people at least. So that's when I met him. I introduced Buddhism into my yoga philosophy and practice. My teacher passed away anyway, so it was time for something else. I discovered that they were very similar, incredibly similar. A little bit of a difference, but they really both came from India originally. So there was a very lot of synchronicity between both of them. It wasn't difficult. The practice of meditation didn't necessarily have to change much. It's just the thought behind it. There's an underlying thought. Buddhist practices that are doing it for the benefit of others, which I hadn't heard before. It doesn't mean they didn't mention it, I just didn't listen. But you don't always hear things until you hear it. Sometimes you have to hear them many times. So, anyway, so I eventually sold the business that I had to a large cosmetics company, and spent the next 4 years losing all the money. So here I am. I'll start working. So here we go. Anybody?
So anyone have any questions?
Anybody except Candy. Yes.
I was interested in the point of realization someone else has been doing the same as me. Just, I'm not quite sure what my question is, but when I first heard that you had independently been doing something similar, how that realization came about. Was it literally when you were by reading the Diamond Platter? Or was it when you actually spoke to Geshe Michael? Or?
No, it was when I read the book. I mean, really, it's just a far more advanced and explanation, and there was more. Struggling for words. It's just much more of a method, as there is in all of Buddhism. There is not a method about this practice to create the condition that you're looking for. Instead of randomly doing it, it was specific. Essentially came down to understanding karma on a much more deep level. So it was from reading the book. It was increased by listening to him. But it was the book. And the book's pretty clear. But like you said, you hear things when you're ready to hear them. So you can hear them 1,000 times and not doesn't penetrate. And essentially, maybe for the exception of all of you, people are quite lazy. So if I ask one of my teachers or one of my monk friends, why is this so difficult? So what, because we're really attached to the way things are. So that's the method or the reason why we tend to struggle. So you loosen the grasp of the concept that you have gradually, and then things change.
Could you share with us a specific instance where you've done this? I don't know if you mentioned it in the book or not. I mean, perhaps something recent, but it's not in the book, that you've done this and this happened.
No.
Oh, okay.
No, I couldn't remember. I don't have a good memory. Something that happened. Well, see, it's interesting because while he teaches that you do these things and you see a change, so everybody thinks, oh, my karma's going to change immediately. Another point of view, probably more traditional, that his would be that, in fact, it doesn't work like that at all. It doesn't actually change. But you feel like it's changing, because if you change your attitude, you know, what seems bad suddenly seems good. So that's, I think that, for me, that makes more sense. Because otherwise it's a little bit like a TV show if you walk around going, I did a good thing, I bet my karma's going to change. Or I'm so good, I did all these things, and my life's terrible. Then you read about some person you never heard of. I read about somebody on the second page of the Herald Tribune today. It's the most incredible, unbelievable story. He was around the World Trade Center on 9/11, and this man came in and was screaming about Islamics and stuff, and shot him. Shot, scored. So, and he was quite injured. And didn't have medical, he didn't have this, he didn't have the other guy. He's supposed to be actually Texas, supposed to be executed in 2 weeks. And the man who was the victim is appealing massively to try and have him pardoned. And when you read it, it's just extraordinary. His reasoning for this, it's just as if you go, wow, this guy is enlightened, or compared to most people, his point of view, the lesson, and then you've got the guy on death row whose heart's been altered by the fact that his extreme compassion for someone that he shot. So, I don't know if that had into your question at all. Or yours, but yes.
So when we're choosing our karmic partners and we're projecting out, you know, the goals that we hope to achieve with them and how we hope to help them, how do we really sort of gently make some of these judgments of what is actually help to them? How do we know whether the help that we're giving them is actually the appropriate help that we should be giving them? We know in ourselves, sort of, so say for instance I'm helping a friend find a new job, but maybe it's actually not meant for her to find a new job, maybe it's meant for her to take a different path, but I in my mind have chosen her as my karmic partner and I'm helping her find a job and it's just not working. How do I sort of balance that personal judgment with, you know, what is actually should be done?
How often do you meditate?
Every day.
Okay. Good. Well, most people don't, so it's a fair question. I don't know. I think Roy said it, you know, it's about intention. We have an intention. I don't know about karmic partners. I wouldn't specifically pick one. I just start with the intention with I'm going to try and, you know, be good today and not hurt anybody. I think it's awkward to do that. I believe what I've read, heard, that in India, for instance, which is, you know, all based on karma and they have untouchables and people, they think it's kind of odd that people want to come and interfere with their lives because they accept their karma. So like you said, maybe the person has to struggle through what they're struggling through, so it's your intention to support them rather than say, oh, you're my pet project. It's going to make you better. Because often you find out the person you're helping, you know, helps you more than you help them. So I think you have to be careful. I have someone who's worked with me for 8 or 9 years, and she's extraordinary, unbelievable, except she's stuck, because she has a problem with self-confidence. So even though she appears as amazingly bright and work like 10 people, do all sorts of things, she still sees herself as small. So the only person she wants advice from or guidance is me. So I said, well, we'll start again. We have to ask them. Because I'm not going to come and push you the whole time. So it wouldn't be right. Especially as I suspect I'm going to dislodge certain things in her. And she's not a practitioner, she sees me as doing it for her. So that's okay, but you have to do the mental work. So I'm not going to check you every day and say, because it's unhealthy. So, but I think just think about your intention. It's probably the safe thing to do. So all the questions from the left, or from your right, I'll just look at you guys. Anybody on the right? Yes.
Could you maybe tell us a little bit about how you, what kind of principles you practically apply or try to apply in the day-to-day running or used to of your business? So what kind of principles you would use to actually bring your business to where it is or was? Like on a very practical level, daily operational level.
Oh, I'm not very good at that. I mean, you probably figured it out. I was extremely reliant on intuition, extremely, much more than most people. Sort of opinionated, but I did realize quite quickly that most of the people that were irritating me, and that was a lot of people, was, not sure what to say, caused by me, but that I was I realized that I had to look at myself when I wanted to change things in business. The idea of being successful, well, I was always sort of moderately becoming more and more successful, even though I never saw it that way. I was also more or less slightly about to go bankrupt in 15 years. Nobody knew it, but I did. But I sort of ignored it. Because in my business there was a cash flow, so I just kept about 2 days ahead of the cash for the creditors. And it wasn't because I was well, because I was foolish. It was just, I had a vision of what I wanted and I just wasn't interested in settling. I just kept putting the money in and money in and money in. And then one day I realized, well, I had a realization, I thought, well, I suppose I am actually successful. This place is pretty famous. And there's lots of people who have done well from it, who own apartments and homes and things. I just happened to be one of them. I was accepting of the fact I wasn't probably going to make any real money. So that was important. Because in a strange way, as soon as I accepted it, it changed. So, again, I'm not sure. Couldn't actually hear your question, so I'm just kind of going all over the place. But what's interesting is people these days, I find it irritating. That's my big thing, irritation. Talk about brands. They don't talk about a business, they talk about having a brand or wanting a brand. And the one I had was quite successful, but it took 30 years. So I think that's not mine. You have to do this thing, sort of, this concept of 100% effort, no attachment to the result, which certainly in the West is very difficult, because it's contrary to everything you've ever heard, or anything you think you should have, because it's all about making as much money and being as successful as you can as soon as possible, and etc., etc. But if you accept that there's a concept of, or you think there's a possibility that you've had 10,000 lives, why should this one suddenly make you rich and successful? So when I'd given up the attachment to the idea of what financial success was, ironically appeared. I have no idea if I, trick the karma by giving up with it. I did the same thing about getting married. I got married, so it worked out. I was getting better, actually. first 10 years were rocky. Anyone else? Probably the person who just walked in has a question. Probably two.
When a champion flies, why does it mean the most?
Yes. Hundreds, yes.
How did...
The yoga mat, look at that.
Yeah, well, it was supposed to actually, just in case the floor was rough. It was supposed to lie in my bottom.
Put it under your bottom.
How did the designer cutter principle or your beliefs, did it help bring the people's teamwork or belief better in the operation? Vis-a-vis probably another business that was run purely on profit.
Well, we were trying to be profitable.
Yes, I mean that's it.
So the question was, what was the question?
With your beliefs,
Yeah, how did I manage people? Was it integrated into...
and did it actually help the people? Did the belief actually trickle down to hundreds of people, number one? And did that help bring the organization a different energy rather than a company that's just run strictly on profit?
Sure. So did my sort of unconventional way of running a business, entrepreneurially based with this karmic spiritual undertone, how did it affect the way I manage people? Well, it was everything. It was like the operating system was that. So to the degree that I was operating it well, which would depend on how many people are irritating me, it affected it. See, I didn't think they ever really knew. See, to me there was the unconscious element of this magical stuff, which I thought they attracted them, but they didn't really understand why, because I didn't make a point of telling them. We didn't have daily prayer sessions or meditation sessions. We did have a yoga studio for quite a number of years, which was quite unusual, but that was about as unusual as it got. But we attracted people from all over the country, and I always felt that some of them were there, and they felt there was an energy, but they didn't know what to talk about it, or but it was absolutely quite powerful, I think. So with managing people, I was very good at managing difficult, creative people. In fact, some of them, there were two brothers from Glasgow. Anybody know anything about Glaswegians? Well, they tend to be drunk. They tend to hit you first, then they ask a question after they've beat you up. So the two brothers, incredibly talented, but horrible. Actually, one was quite sweet. The drunk was sweet. The less, more high-functioning one. He was really not so nice in a way. But he once said to me, he said, nobody else would employ this. He said, that was their way of saying thank you. After about 15 years. So there just was managing people was the same as managing my life. I just didn't tell them they had to meditate. I'd encourage them. I was responsible for at least 6 ex-girlfriends becoming yoga teachers. I'm actually serious. And things like that. People send you letters years later and say, well, you changed my life because blah, blah, blah. But that was very difficult. I wasn't somebody that would... I wasn't walking around, hearing safety or anything. One interesting thing happened after I sold the business. the first people that noticed the difference were there was about 20, 15 maintenance people that used to clean at night and stuff like that in the daytime. And they after a few months they complained. They said, you know, nobody respects what we do anymore. Nobody walks down the back staircase and runs their fingers along and leaves notes everywhere. That was me. And it's interesting because these are the lowest paid people. One of them, Pedro, had been there 25 years, and that's what made them feel like they were important, and that's why they stayed. And, that's the sense of how I think you have to manage. Everybody has to feel they're important, but I wouldn't walk around hugging people. Far from it. It took me about 25 years to realize you actually had to praise people, which I thought was kind of ridiculous because I wasn't praising myself. So, but if you don't have a standard that's harder to achieve, people don't achieve it. So yeah, it was definitely an undercurrent in the whole business, was this sense, whether they knew it or not, that things were different. But we did have very high standards, and people generally not so difficult to manage, because I assumed we could always work something out. I wasn't terribly good at systems. So, yeah. After about 2003, I decided I'd hire lots of MBAs. That didn't work out too well. What do you hire for? Incredibly bright. No, they didn't, actually. They couldn't understand how somebody who didn't go to Harvard, they were trying to figure it out. It was unfigurable. They even did a case study on us at Harvard. Did they write those things? I thought it was totally boring. I don't know what they were talking about. But it was fun for one day. But it was interesting because they invited me, and I think there were about, I don't know how many people they had in the classroom, 100 people or 200 people that were in this women's class. Professor came, and so she did her classroom. She's a great teacher, and at the end I spoke to them for a few minutes, and about 200 brilliant people, 3 of them came, 2 or 3 came at the end of the class and looked at me and sort of, it was like pleadingly said, is there something I can do other than banking or finance? It was almost they were depressed because it wasn't. And I said, well, do something you love, which was weird. So a couple of them did, and they stayed in touch. But that's different. You're making a choice because you feel compelled based on all sorts of reasons to do something, possibly for the wrong reason. So, not you could, but see, when people feel like they've got the wrong job and they're going to change it, I'm not sure that's, I always go, well, why do you think the job will make you feel different? You enjoy anything, it comes back to that thing of, it's the intention and how you're doing it that's important. So that's what changes your world. So you feel like you're calmer and improved. Okay. Yes?
Time was it?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, I have a question. I don't know if this is on or not, so let me just speak up.
It's kind of on.
Excuse me?
I can't even hear mine.
I don't know. Okay, it is on. I haven't read the book, but if I heard you correctly, so please correct me if I didn't. Earlier on this evening.
Which one didn't you read? Either.
I know there was one.
Well, read the Diamond Cut, it's much better.
That I have read. No, that I have read. Anyway, my question was, if I heard you correctly earlier this evening, you said that you've run out of money and you're going to start work again. Did I actually hear you correctly? Or was that a joke?
Can you hear a question?
She said, when you say you lost all your money and you start working again.
Oh, most of it. Not all of it. Well, I spent it.
Okay.
I gave some of it away, stuff like that.
So what I wanted to ask you is, it sounds like you were saying maybe this is a transition point in your life, or juncture. And I just wondered what you were, if you could talk to us a bit about that and how you're going to take your karmic management philosophy and principles forward and whatever you're going to do next.
Well, it's kind of, it's a little odd, you know, you build a company for 30 years and then you sell it, and you think you're going to stay involved and then you don't, and then it takes you a few years to figure out that actually it was quite a shock, which I was surprised at, actually. So I said to my wife, well, I think, you know, we'll just retire, right? She said, well, you can't. You can't leave all those people that believe in you. And I was shocked that she actually thought that. I said, no. It was a very personal thing, even with the accounts we had. There was definitely a sense of belonging to a club or something that was very important to them. And I was part of it. So I thought, okay, well, I need to stay for their benefit, but then the company I'd sold to decided I was actually too much of a problem. It's common, you know, an entrepreneur starts something, they're not supposed to be good at the next stage. But now they're not doing very well with my company, so I kind of look like a genius. Oh, that idiot really was good. So so I just decided I'd start a few new companies. So I did. Clearly I would use the same principles, I'd just be with a higher intention, more clarity, and that and being older, it appears to make you a bit smarter. I don't know, maybe it's less stupid or less inclined to do things the wrong way. So far it's going well. You're okay? You're not sure? Okay.
When you say like you'll use the same principles but with more clarity, is it possible to articulate those principles?
Well, after 30 years growing a business and growing it, let's say, I mean, you would tend to trust your instincts more, and my personal practice in terms of what I actually do, practice is far more intense. So that leads to having more powerful ideas that just seem to appear. So, yeah. I mean, if you leave school at 14 and you start a business at 20 and you don't really have any education, so to speak, and then you end up being somewhat successful, and then you have a 4-year break, you sort of, things change a little bit. You have a certain confidence in your ability to create things. So, I just think that's what it is. You sort of, you left a 15-year-old behind and a 20-year-old, and you feel like, oh, actually, I'm quite confident and not attached, and don't have to prove anything because I'll be okay anyway. So it's kind of quite a nice feeling. But go on, have another one.
Thank you. In the group that meets to try and the Karmic co-management discussion group, I think it's giving an example of specific intentions. You said this setting intentions is really important. Can you perhaps give a couple of examples of intentions that you think are helpful or useful that you've used?
I don't know what I've used, but again, one other Geshe Nikki is the other American Geshe. He would say to me, well, most important thing you can do every day is set your intention. So even if your intention is not to get irritated or to do something different than you were doing the day before, that's the most important thing you do. Generally, for most people, present company probably accepted. People just wake up and do the same thing. Whatever mood they're in, that's the mood they take with them. They're not embracing the Dalai Lama's suggestion of you wake up and realize it's a miracle, first of all. It's precious. Because there's an assumption we'll all wake up. I don't know why. You could as easily not wake up. That could be the day you don't wake up. Or it's the day you die. So that's a very powerful intention, to actually have this sense for a few minutes that, wow, this is a precious day. So if I try and catch that as I wake up, that's my first thought, generally. And the more sort of energy you can put behind that, then when you sit and meditate, if you do, or you sit and think with your coffee, whatever you happen to be doing, I think it's sort of as simple as that. It's a precious day, don't waste it. That can change the whole day. Generally, most people, in Groundhog Day, the movie is an excellent example of that. You know, you just have the same day every day until things are so bad that you change. It's interesting that people usually don't change until things are awful. I mean, my experience. We're just wired that way. We sort of don't. You hear about these miraculous stories of people, but then you have to take into account that there must have been some incredible merit that they were born with, that accrued, that had to change. But for most people, it's a difficult time that wakes you up, not an easy time. So, an addendum to the answer to the question that somebody asked. I would honestly say that I viewed the last 4 years, or if as I was somewhat asleep. Yeah, somewhat asleep. And I said that to someone I worked with closely, and he said, "But what are you talking about? You made a movie, and you did this, and you did that." You know, I said, "You don't understand." He didn't understand what I thought I was asleep. So I did have I don't know what your year was like, but mine was horrendous. I had a very difficult year, or two, the last couple, and the realization was that it was absolutely a blessing to wake up. So when I turned 60, I thought, wow, I've got a day left, a week, a month, maybe 10 years, but I could live to 90. It's impossible, right? I may not remember it. I'm in trouble right now. But the idea that I could have 20 or 30 years left, really at this age changes you, because you say, well, would I want to build another company? Doesn't matter. But would I want to die at 90 thinking that I wasted this 30 years? Well, no. That became the most important thing in a very powerful way. So that was my birthday realization that this search for enlightenment, even if you don't get it, it's going to get you closer than you were if you weren't really putting all your effort into it. So, anyway, but that's really the intention is to as His Holiness says, if the best you can do is just don't hurt anybody, you're doing great. Because most people do hurt somebody. You go to bed at night, you sit there for a minute, you go, ooh. Purity of body, speech and mind wasn't there because I kind of brushed that person off. Or I could see they wanted to talk to me and I didn't talk to them. Or I didn't clean the bathroom when I was in there. That was difficult because I always think someone's going to walk in and think, why am I picking up paper off the floor in an airport? But, you know, it's just, no one's ever said anything. But it's not hard to find where you're unconscious during the day. It certainly isn't for me. So it doesn't have to be huge intention. It's just taking those three thoughts into your life, rather than making it, oh, I'm a Buddhist, or I'm this kind of a person, or I think it's better to be invisible. We're safe in here, right? We talk about this. Anyone else dying to ask questions?
I think when somebody gets hired, when they get a job, the tangibles tends to be quite important. When somebody has a job, I think things like salary, package, benefits tend to be quite important. So how did you use your principles to determine how this should apply?
Oh, I let someone else do it. When I could. Well, when I first started in New York, nobody wanted to work for me because it was a dump. So it was easy. Eventually I found a few assistants and people who wanted to be trained, and they got minimum wage. So that was the extent of HR. I never really had that concept. It was different when you hire MBAs, and it became obviously a lot more corporate at that point. But I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about it. I thought what's that thing you're supposed to have in a company? The thing nobody ever remembers? The vision or the mission, something like that. So I was pretty clear of the vision. I could never figure out the mission. The vision I knew. So I was thinking, look, this is the best place to work, so you're going to love it. It's kind of an Apple-like arrogance. You see what I mean? On a small level, it was sort of that sort of thought. Why would you not want to work here? And the truth is, people did. So all the rest just got taken care of. I've never understood. Still don't. I find it quite alarming that people think about all these things rather than thinking about, today I woke up. Who cares about your 401k or your this or the other? I look at the newspaper every day and I'm just riveted by so many people suffering. It's just polarizing. So I don't really think about the other stuff. I've tried it in Singapore, actually, having a few conversations. People they talk to me about it, I never said it. It's funny, especially with a banker or somebody like that. They don't understand it all. Just interesting. I used to fight with the HR people. I thought it was ridiculous. Aren't you supposed to make this place better instead of making it an obstacle? Yeah, I don't think I would ever do that again. You can't even ask someone how old they are. Do all sorts of things in America when you're not part of a public company. You get sued. Inappropriate question. What's the last question?
Just to add on, I think it's interesting you mentioned Apple. Do you find some similarity between Google to this?
I don't really understand Google.
No?
You want to find something, you Google it, that's all I know.
No, they have this idea.
I'm sort of an appearance person, so Google doesn't particularly appeal to me because it's kind of ugly. And I think I have a Gmail account somewhere for something. I don't even know how to feel. I can't find send. So I really don't like that thing. No, Apple I kind of love because it's an amazing story. I mean, he got fired, he went off for 11 years, came back for $1, and the place was was going down. So he's so fantastic because he's such a horrible person in some ways. He's so brilliant in others. He's a great teacher. And I think a product has to look good. I think a product needs to, I sort of have the 3 nod or the 5 nod. You have to go, I like it, I like it, I like it. As soon as you come across a product where you're not sure, whoever's around that created that marketing, it's not working. So, in America, Apple advertise a fair bit, but I don't even think they advertise. I think they're just spending money to show off, in a good way. It's sort of like, that kind of appeals to me. It's not traditional advertising because they're not really getting them to buy the product, they're really buying it.
It's in the software.
Huh?
Selling it in the software.
I don't think they're even selling it, they're just, they're just spending some money because they can. I don't think it's even about selling because the iPad, if it was a standalone business, would have been in the top Fortune 500 or something after its first year. That's how big it was. I don't think it was because of the advertising. And every article, most articles, before they actually went for sale were, oh, I think this is going to be the one that fails, which was fascinating because it was probably the biggest success. So, anyway. Yeah, if you look at someone like that, Steve Jobs has to have an extraordinary confidence in his vision. Now, I'm not sure if he meditates. I read somewhere that he had some exposure to it actually years ago. But you don't have to meditate to have an inspiration. Many people who meditate don't really listen to this intuitive download. I had to have nothing else I could do. Because if you put me in a room and told me to think, I'd be lost. I don't think. I just wait for it to pop into my head. So there we are. I hope it was somewhat interesting or helpful. It was great for me. I'm certainly glad I replied to Roy. It's nice to see that this happened. This was, Geshe Michael actually asked me to be in charge of this. It used to be called Enlightened Business, and then he said, well, can you be in charge of it? And I changed it to Karmic Management. And it's a terrible job, I just couldn't do it at all. But his vision is sort of working because you're all here and it's amazing, and Roy and Jackie and organized this thing, and it's amazing because I think this is the way to create change. I'm not sure. I don't think politicians are going to do it. I was in a school today having a look. I can't remember which one. The kids, and they had something on the board about the environment. I thought, these 6-year-olds are 1,000 years ahead of politicians. if they sort of understand the consequence of how to create the conditions for what you want. Politicians are sort of creating the condition for the end of the world, as far as I can figure out. So, what you're doing is extraordinary that you do this. How often do you do this? Is it? It's not every week, it's every month. Yeah. So, and Geshe Michael's doing this. So, have you all heard him before? Well, that's my experience. Did I talk about the book? No, I shouldn't, right? What? Oh, the film. Yes, I made a documentary, biographical documentary. It's called Fidel Sassoon, the movie, and you should all buy it. In September, you should, at least if you won't buy it, you should VOD it, whatever that is. It's on iTunes, yes. I've never found it. It's called, you're all ready? This is the Buddha of hairdressing. Fidel Sassoon, the movie. Fidel Sassoon is an extraordinary, incredibly inspiring person. It's a very, very good film. No bad thing in it to me. I was sort of dragged into it because we had to segue between things he wouldn't say about himself and the fact that his story was so entrenched in his mind that I had to try and jog him. So there's a few too many moments where you hear me and see me, but probably won't bother you as much as it bothered me. But it's kind of it's like a Disney movie, except it's true. He's incredibly charismatic, and he went to an orphanage when he was 5 years old, and he came out at 11, and instead of having a chip on his shoulder, he was just always trying to be better. And he's like a hidden Buddhist. He's just always incredibly charming and giving to people, and was unbelievably successful. So we made this film. Probably never make any money back unless you at least buy it. And that was the plug. So I'm going to come back next year and see how many people actually watched it. Make your hairdresser watch it at least. They have such a low self-esteem and usually poor taste as well. So, sure, I have no idea. Like, how can you be a hairdresser? I never tell them that. Well, I used to if they were. So you've got the movie, then you've got Geshe Michael, and sometimes Venerable Punsap is one of my teachers, comes to Singapore. He's a Haitian monk, he's an incredible teacher. I think Jackie could inform you if he's willing to talk to a bigger group. I think he may be coming September, October. There's somebody who brings him once or twice a year to Singapore. He's a wonderful teacher, extraordinary. So, thank you very much. Thank you, Roy.
Please come back.
On YouTube.
Just wanted to ask you to come again, please.
Oh.
Come back.
Ask him when I've left. I might. It's very nice here. Low taxes. You know, the only problem is you have to, with the 12-hour thing, of who you're going to talk to. Because I can't do anything. I have to talk to people.
New York.
What?
New York.
New York? Yeah, but I have to stay up late. I have to go to bed at 10 o'clock. Huh?
You have to learn how to use Skype.
FaceTime. But yeah, I can, well, but I can use that, I can't really. I might. Probably going to live in Europe, because I figured out, if you go to Europe, I can sort of have until 2 o'clock in the afternoon free, you know, when I could not talk to anyone kind of stuff, and then I could work. That sounded pretty good. It's very hard to incorporate it into your life if you actually really want a few hours a day of, especially if you have a family. And I have 2 families, an old one and a younger version. So that might be that. It is wonderful here, I must say. Very clean. I kept telling my kid in the airport, they need off the floor in Singapore.
You don't have to use notes for the English.
Well, no, it's true. Okay, thank you. Michael, something? Oh no. No, thank you, that's very kind.
So for everyone else, thank you so much for coming.